Hello, we're back again. It's me, Bruce from Happiness is Egg-Shaped, joined by the man at the top, Scotland Rugby News, Gavin Harper. It's probably the poorest prepared podcast out there, Gav, but do we have fun?
Don't we just? I liked your message of 10 minutes notice was greatly appreciated. But yeah, there's a few things to squeeze in tonight, so I will make it work.
Do you know when we first started talking about this, we said, is this the right time to start? Because it seemed like it was the end of the season, yet we're just talking there before we hit play, and there's so much to cover that we've not got the time for it. It's just been relentless. You've been scribbling away non-stop.
The global season means there is no break now. I saw Edinburgh back in pre-season today, and obviously there's still some of their boys on the Scotland tour. So, it's about getting a couple of weeks break whenever you can, I think. But we'll have the final stretch this week with Scotland and Uruguay, so we're not far away.
I think there's still a fair bit to come though. Let's start with we sort of touched on it last week, and we've not given it a huge amount of time. We are going to have a specific pod dedicated to the women's game, but the under-20s have just had an experience. I think 3 games, three tough losses, one very narrow, but there's a bit of hope there that at least it's been given, a bit of credit and a bit of time and energy. The 18s are away down to Wales to play 3 kind of mini games, then a bigger game. So the women's game's definitely progressing and getting a bit more attention, Gav.
100%. I think for all that, our Fixing Scottish Rugby series maybe looked at the male pathway and stuff last week. I think the women's pathway is quite obvious that it is working. There are players coming through that pathway, through the Scotland systems, but also from elsewhere. I think the Scotland had an opportunity, to go away and actually build on, have a few weeks in a camp, which is great for coaches. Claire Cruikshank was involved and obviously led that. I think she'll have learned a lot about the players. The players will have learned a lot about that sort of high performance environment. I think they were unlucky. I thought they actually played pretty well in spells, and the France game was a funny one because I watched the first half and they were right in it, and then France sort of got on top and it became a wee bit hard for them to kind of get back into the game. But I think there's massive strides being made there, and I think it's encouraging for the future. I think I wrote last week that gap between Ireland, Wales, and Italy, Scotland at senior women's level is definitely now much narrower than it has ever been, really. And I think if they can kind of become the best of the rest, and that has to be the short-term goal, because France and England are so far in front of everybody else in terms of their setup that, I think if they can achieve that at senior women's level, then great.
I think that you're right. Finishing third's kind of like finishing first because the other two are so far ahead. I think you're right, though. All 3 games in it till half-time, even against Italy, leading at half-time. And then it was only 1 score. I don't know if that's a depth issue, when changes come in, but you're bang on. Shanks, another one of my old school buddies, Gala Academy. I tell you what, Gav, Gregor Townsend, John DL, Richie Gray, Chris Patterson, Claire Cruikshank, Bruce Aitchison, they're all right up there. They're all right up there.
Some are more up there than others. You'd have quite a coaching setup.
Yeah, I'll be the cheerleader. I'll come and announce on the sideline. But no, class.
Are you any good at carrying water?
Well, I'd check the pH level and all sorts. I'd be the boy. But for Shanks, like her knowledge of root and branch of the women's game in this country is exceptional, because she's been involved in that pathway for such a long time, encouraging players through the Edinburgh Uni programme. Herself was a good player. She was of a generation where they were having to pay for it themselves. They weren't affiliated with the union. She's been through the whole thing. I think it's class to see her involved. It'll be interesting to see what the next steps are, because Brian Eason, that's very much Bernie's programme, the senior Scotland women. It'll be interesting to see if Claire Cruikshank is part of that succession planning for when Bernie's done.
Yeah, you would think so, but there's also part of me that thinks Claire's established now what she's really good at is that identification of and the development of a player from a really almost like, a starting point really to go on to become. You look at the number of current and former Scotland squad members who've come through the Edinburgh uni system, and it just seems like a no-brainer to keep her involved there as long as you possibly can, and maybe bring in somebody with more high performance in the national team job. I don't know. It's an interesting one, but yeah,
it is an interesting one because there's that bit of being an elite coach at a specific level rather than only being seen as an elite coach at that senior level. I think that's an interesting point, maybe one for another day. And while we're on the women's game, two more superstars. Holly Davidson just keeps climbing, and you can never please, referee in Test match rugby. You can't please everybody. She's being given the Springboks. Most people saying great performance, Holly, but as usual, social media sometimes is better just staying clear. But what an amazing thing. She's come such a long way, and not for any other reason other than she's a brilliant referee.
And that's it. Like, there was I saw a couple of silly comments on socials that I was glad people had responded to appropriately, saying that she was only there because World Rugby needed to promote a female referee, and that's just rubbish. She's been a great ref in the URC top Pro 14, whatever it's been called for a long time now, and she deserves these kind of opportunities. I actually thought she had a pretty good game. I saw some criticism about the Andre Esterhuizen red card, but as we were saying just before we came on air, like, she ultimately decided it was yellow and worthy of review by the bunker, and I think the decision is therefore then out of her hands when he's sent off. So I thought some of that criticism was a wee bit unfair. I think social media is what it is these days. I think I would be loath to get into a big debate about the pros and cons of Twitter particularly, but look, I think it's great for Scottish rugby, and actually Scottish rugby has lacked a prominent figure on the refereeing scene probably since the days of Jim Fleming, and that's far too long.
Yeah, that gag of what do you call a Scotsman in a World Cup final, the referee is long gone. But now we've had not a Scotsman, but a Scots person was in a World Cup final. It's class and such a brilliant role model. She's an incredible lady, and another role model. Tomo touchdown in Paris. I can't wait for the Olympics. It's because I become an expert in all sorts of sports. Oh, yeah. See when the ponies are jumping. So see when the ponies are jumping, I know it all. Climbing, BMX, you name it, Gav. I am an expert in all of the above.
The Aitchison household must be an interesting place during the Olympics.
It is. Nicky and I sit and tune it over. I remember when the Sevens was in Brazil, I think I maybe said this, and my wife's a sportswoman, played hockey, played netball, played all sorts, but rugby never really interested her. Yeah. And I'll never forget watching the Sevens in Rio, and she was watching Australia, and I think Charlotte Caslick, who is everybody's favourite, she did something brilliant, and my wife turned to me and went, "Do you know what? I watch that and I feel like I want to play, but I know I wouldn't look like that." And that's how you're watching it going, I could do that. I could climb that wall. I could jump, and fine well that actually there's no chance you.
No, it's it's an amazing spectacle. I think it's maybe become a wee bit diluted. I feel like there's not been the build up or the hype that there maybe was in the past. And I don't know if that's because we'll hark back to London 2012 and because it was here and we all remember it.
There's a bit of that, but I think some of it is there's been so much sport on. We've had the Euros, the rugby's been going, it's not. It's for rugby. A bit, it still cracks me up. I was listening to some of the golf commentary at the weekend, and they're going, "Oh yeah, he's an Olympic gold medalist."
Yeah.
You're like, "Oh, aye, golf's in the like, like who knew?" And for sevens, it's not the be all and end all, but what an opportunity. And you see the videos. I don't know if you've seen the videos of the French squad dancing with the dancers from Moulin Rouge and stuff. Like the hype. I would love to be in Paris for all it. I'm not going to be there for any of it, but it just so exciting. What a chance to spotlight sevens on that stage and hopefully sort of spread the audience a bit or bring in new viewers.
And that's it. Rugby's got to take every opportunity it sort of gets his hands on to drag new folk in, because it needs that audience. It needs new people to come to games or watch games on TV. So let's hope it's a great spectacle. I would love to be in Paris, but I could also do with some time off over the next few weeks. So
a mate of mine, Kev McBarron, who was president of Kowloon Rugby Club, my club in Hong Kong, I remember him saying, sevens is for the masses and 15s is for the purists. He said it's like T20 and test match cricket. T20 is for the masses, test matches for the purists. And I was watching the hurling yesterday, and I was in Ireland. I was in Cork in May, and everybody was buzzing about hurling. And then the Cork team ended up in the final that was on the TV yesterday. And you're watching that and you're thinking, although I don't understand the rules, I understand the game. Do you know what I mean? Whereas you could watch rugby and go, what, how, what? It's so complicated. Whereas hurling, and they're all amateur. It's like watching rugby 40 years ago. They're all amateur. One of the interesting things I heard was that you qualify by birth. You can't move teams. You can only play for your county. You can't play for anybody else, which imagine applying that law in rugby.
Incredible. Some places wouldn't have a team.
Well, it would be an interesting one. I posted a wee cheeky comment of somebody saying about the boys that the Springboks capped at the weekend against Portugal, saying Scotland will have to go and look for other folks' players because we've just capped all these boys, which it made me chuckle. It's one of those wee digs that you can either let it wind you up or you can have a chuckle. But no, the hurling just made me giggle. It'll not be long till that's an Olympic sport, and Ireland will be able to claim that they're the best.
Who knows? I mean, it's an incredible spectacle. The old,
I'm going.
All-Ireland final.
I'm going next year.
82,000 folk, and they all are right into it. Like, it looked incredible.
If it was a draw at the end of extra time, it was a replay. Can you imagine inviting them all back on Tuesday night? How fun is that? I think that's magic.
It's like the old days of FA, before my time, FA Cup final replays, and they play on Thursday night.
I remember watching the replays. Crystal Palace, Thursday. I remember.
Do you know, it's incredible. Look, it's how have we got on hurling?
That was my fault. Apologies. And then last one on the women's game, the friendlies have been announced before, WXV2, which is class, and hopefully we'll be able to get decent crowds in to watch Wales and Fiji as they then go away and play in the WXV2, which, got to go again, haven't they? Tough games, though. Italy, Japan, Australia.
Yeah, they are. I think it's interesting because the immediate reaction is when they missed out on WXV1, it's disappointment. But actually, speaking to Rachel Malcolm a few weeks after, she was quite upbeat about it and saying, well, actually, it gives us a chance to win another trophy, defend the title, and actually build on some of the things that they maybe got wrong in the Six Nations.
Yeah.
I think it felt like this Six Nations should have been the time that they were that best of the rest. They kind of kicked on, but they didn't. So they now have to do that this year. I think the two warm-up games are interesting because they'll be totally contrasting styles. They obviously will know Wales well from the Six Nations. First time they've ever played Fiji, but you know what you're going to get when you play a Fijian team. At any level, male, female, they'll chuck it about. That should be a really good watch, actually.
It'll be brilliant because the Fijian community, the families that are based in the barracks will come down the Fijian community, and not just in Edinburgh, from a bit further afield. I think will gather, and the atmosphere will just be class. You touched on it there about the chances, the women going into WXV1. Scotland men under 20s promotion. I mean, we were both there the other night. Brilliant for those boys to win a trophy. To win a trophy at home is something Scottish players don't get a lot of opportunity to do. But I'm worried, my man, for that promotion. When I watch some of the 20s from the top tournament, that final, that England team is brutal. The third, fourth playoff, and you see the Georgian team. The Fijians are coming down the way. Some of the tries they scored were outrageous. Spain getting that level at under 20s is very, very strong.
And actually, when you think that Scotland, I think, have only got about a dozen of that squad who'll kick about next year. They lose like Liam McConnell, who was so good.
Jerry Blythe Lafferty was my player of the tournament. I thought the kid was.
I think for the level of the consistency, but like for the standout moments of like a massive tackle, a turnover, how many turnovers I don't know, but like Freddie Douglas is too good.
He's
I keep
class.
saying this.
We've spoken about him a lot. The kid is class.
But the challenge is now to find, like Ollie Blythe Lafferty, like the scrum in that America game was just phenomenal. The challenge is to find all these players appropriate levels to play next season. And for Ollie Blythe Lafferty, that might be the Premiership, but that might not work for Freddie Douglas. It has to be done on a case-by-case basis so that when they do come to play the Six Nations or that World Championship next year, these players are actually battle-hardened, they're ready to go, and they've not played 6 meaningless friendlies against who? Like Kenny Murray was saying that he thinks there's enough games for them, but there has to be the competition to go with the actual minutes on the field. They have to be playing a level that pushes them all the way. And I don't think we've got that nailed at all yet.
There's also the issue around eligibility. Isaac Coates was first choice number 10 through the Six Nations, but he's not eligible because there are different eligibility laws for the World Rugby sanctioned tournament. So he's, as it happened, he was injured anyway, but that's an odd one. And it's a shame because Kenny's had that group, and although the opposition wasn't the strongest, I think you could see progression as a group. Years and years ago, when I was coaching at Watsonians with Cammy Mather, I remember him trying to champion an age group level. But unfortunately, a lot of the players who were 18, 19, 20, 21 were good enough to be playing at the time Prem 1. So if you took them out, but then there was a bit of a move to, well, can we put a 20s team in that don't actually compete in the league, but they play 10 games. So they play every club team away, if you see what I mean. So they play Watsonians at Myerside, Boroughmuir at Megaland, Gallat, Netherdale, Melrose at Greenyard. So they only ever play another home game as an opportunity for them to play together, and it doesn't count towards points. I mean, I've not got the answers, as we know, because that was in what I wrote for Scotland Rugby News, but there's that case-by-case thing you've just said. Absolutely. I just worry that there maybe isn't the various levels for Freddie to jump up, Ollie to play Premiership, Liam McConnell and Tom Curry to go and test himself at Championship in England. And, I think you're right. There is some quality there. And a lot of people who were going to watch, I think, have developed their knowledge of some of the players who are in the pathway. And they'll be disappointed if they don't see them coming out the other end.
I think that's it. I think, like we could talk about pathways and stuff all day, but for me, it is really, really important that these players now have opportunities to develop because, as you say, the main World Championship was not even one. It was ridiculous levels step up, and actually, yes, 100% great that the Scottish lads won a trophy, but had they not done that, Scottish Rugby as an organisation would have had huge questions to answer because, let's be honest, the level of opposition was pretty poor.
Yeah, I think there's potentially a move to extend that tournament above and add.
I think so. I think you
A
have
couple
to.
of, sticking, and unfortunately because of Scotland getting beaten by Uruguay last year, the seeding meant that Scotland and Japan ended up in the same group. But I think not necessarily common sense, but a conversation to be had of the strength of an age group. Could Japan and Scotland jump up to that top tier and make those games in that tier that we've just seen Scotland leave from, become a bit more competitive? Because seeing Hong Kong and Samoa lose by hundreds, and the final was just a case of how many were Scotland going to win by. There was no real competition, and
Yeah, exactly.
even the Japanese game was probably a bit disappointing, but that was the be all and end all. That was kind of the cup final. I was actually surprised. America were gutsy and physical. I was a wee bit disappointed with their attack. It didn't seem particularly well prepared, is maybe the polite way to put it.
Yeah, I think they were perhaps a wee bit overawed by the physicality of the Scottish players, because rather than maybe being a wee bit more direct at the start of a play and then looking to play wide, they almost went wide and went 20 metres backwards because it looked like none of their pack really wanted to carry into the guts of Liam McConnell, etc. Blythe Lafferty's, who were like, I kept saying to the folk around me in the press box, like, Ollie Blythe Lafferty was monstering folk in the scrum, getting up, and he carried the ball as much as any of the back row, and he was making tackles, and he was dominant there. Like, if you can add wee bits and pieces, like maybe the dynamism of some of his carries wasn't quite where it should be, and there was other bits and pieces that you can add, that, like, get this guy involved as soon as you can with the highest level possible, because he's got such a bright future that, like, it's not a position that we're blessed with loads of numbers in. So, like, get him involved in the Scotland setup, get him learning from somebody like Xander, like, in the autumn, as soon as we can. And that's maybe, that's not getting carried away that the opposition were dreadful, but I think he could hold his own against most of the Six Nations teams.
Wow, that's a big shout.
Like, with the exception of England and France, who, again, like we talked about with the women, who are miles in front, I think Wales, Ireland, the Italians even, like, I think he'd do all right.
It's going to be interesting to see, because he's not going to have his brother next to him. Like, we're going to get a real eye opener to the depth in that pathway come Six Nations this year. And the work started a while ago to see that progression. So hopefully it does, because that finished on quite a high for a group that has quite a number of not just good players but leaders. Liam McConnell's there, Tom Curry's there, Jerry, not necessarily identified with letters after his name, but was definitely a leader of that group. It'll be interesting to see how many of the backs can step up, but there was 2 or 3 of the boys I thought showed a fair bit of guts, and it'll be interesting to see. The 20s, we kind of wait and see, I suppose, a bit with that. News today, before we get to Scotland, news today, Chris Dean is leaving Edinburgh. Probably took most of us by surprise. He's got his wedding coming up soon. He's been a great servant to the club. He's one of the ones that would be weird to see wearing a different kit.
You're no officiating at his wedding, are you?
Nah, unfortunately, that ship has sailed. But you never know. Maybe I'll get the late call if there's a wee, if he stays in if the celebrant has a wee dicky tummy on the day. Maybe I'll get a late call. You're in. It's a sad one because he's struggled for game time, but he's given everything, hasn't he? And when he does, he's one of those. He has a consistent level of performance. He doesn't really dip much below, and he doesn't really peak much above. He just, you know what you're going to get with him. And he's had to go on the wing at times, and but at centres where he's done his best work.
Yeah, and I think that's it. Like, Edinburgh fans will look back at that run to the quarterfinals in 2019 of the Champions Cup, and some of the great games. The win against Toulon, and Jimmy Johnson scored that try from Bill Matters offload. It was Chris Dean and James Johnson in the centre, and not Matt Scott and Mark Bennett. That season was probably his pinnacle, and he was involved with Scotland around that time. Never won a cap. I think had there been a similar summer tour that there is this year, then he would have undoubtedly won multiple caps. Probably a conversation for another day, and that's not a slight on Christine, but I think, as you say, it will be strange to see him wearing another jersey. I don't know where he's off to. I'm sure we'll find out in the coming days. But I think game time was pretty limited in the centre for him last year, and I think probably it was going to be more so this year with Mosese Tuipulotu joining. I think they've obviously got James Lang, Bennett's still there, Matt Curry's had a great year last year, so I think it probably, given that he's obviously had another offer from somebody, it probably makes sense for all parties to just call it quits. And then that ties into the next, the last point we were making about pathways, that where Chris Dean was 10 years ago, Kerr Yule or Geordie Gwynn are now, and maybe it gives them an opportunity to say, right, well, can I force my hand in here,
Yeah, it's and money's obviously an issue. Let's not make any bones about it. Money's an issue, but this is where you would love to see Fergie's fledglings or Busby's babes. You would love to see a group of young pups coming through, and it's so tough though because the URC is brutal. You'd probably get a lot of stick if you took a bunch of young pups down to South Africa for a 2 or 3 game tour and had to face that environment. But I don't know the answer. I hope whatever it is Christine's got, he's sorted. I wouldn't be surprised if he maybe pops up at Newcastle Falcons or somebody like that, because they tend to sign folk that are not going to be away during international windows, a consistent performer, somebody they can pick every week. I don't know enough about the Premiership. I don't know if Dino's stage of life he's willing to go to Japan or America or France. I don't know him. I don't know him well enough. But
do you know, Newcastle's not a bad shout. It's not a million. It wouldn't be a million miles drive from where he stays. He'll know Steve Diamond from their time at Edinburgh, and he kind of fits the mould of what Falcons have looked for in a player that he's been identified by Steve Diamond. He's all the things you described, but he's kind of a nuts and bolts rugby player rather than the X Factor stuff. And I think that really is what they need to make them competitive in the Premiership this season. So that wouldn't surprise me. As you say, if he's just getting married, I think he's got a young family, I would be surprised if he was up in sticks and moving the other side of the world. That seems unlikely, but you never know. I'm sure we'll find out in the days to come.
Yeah, I hope it goes well for him. He's one of the good guys. He's one of those that he can walk with paupers and kings. I think he's always got time for folk. He's always got a smile because he's from the area. He knows everybody around and everybody's supported him. So a massive victory against the mighty Chile at the weekend. I found the first half pretty tough to watch. There was boys in that Chile team. You used to hear this when teams would make it into a European competition at football, and you'd say they were giving themselves a short window. but there was boys in that Chilean team here like, whoa, they loved a tackle. Their defense was they just kind of ran out every now and then, but they were ferocious in defense.
Yeah, they were. The hooker that scored the try and then ended up in the bin, Escobar's just signed for Racing. So, like, I think that says something about the pedigree of some of the individuals that it's just, I suppose they reminded me a wee bit of Italy, probably late 90s, very early 2000s, where they gave it absolutely everything they had for 20 minutes, half an hour, but then when they fell away, the drop-off was massive. I can't think too often I've ever seen Scotland score off first phase, and I think they did that 3 times in the second half. So I find that a bit hard to judge because the level of opposition was clearly, poor at times, although when they played to their absolute pinnacle, the first 20 minutes I had flashbacks to Tonga and Aberdeen.
I was desperate for Dobie to get into 9, and I felt that the game, the tempo of the game went up. Now I don't think that was just because he went to 9, but the speed of ball, and he probably overplayed a couple of times, but it's because he just seemed so desperate to get going. Curry showed a bit of class. I'm glad Sione's on his way home. I think we've spoken about that before, about his purpose on the tour, and that's him coming back, hopefully a bit of a holiday before he has to get back into the campaign with Warriors. There was a lot of boys got exposure, which is probably what we're talking about with the women's 20s and the men's 20s, to get exposure to that elite environment, being on tour. Hopefully they're picking stuff up for the experienced players. Pierre came on and seemed like he was pretty hungry for some action. I wondered if that meant he was getting sent home, but it looks like not. It's hard to judge, isn't it? For all 3 games, it's hard to judge.
I think so. I think even this week, this obviously falls outside the World Rugby window, so none of the XLs are available, hence why they're all coming home. Ewan Johnson's been allowed to stay by Oyonnax, but I'm pretty sure he won't be available to play, which means there'll be a bit of reshuffling. I think there's still enough experienced players. You look at Matt Fagerson, Rory Darge, Rory Sutherland, Ewan Ashman, Scott Cummings. I'm going to name half the team here, but that's the point stands that I think Gregor's been taking enough players that means he avoids any banana skins. I saw there was an Argentinian team put like 70 points on Uruguay at the weekend. So yeah, they were much better at the World Cup, but I would like to think that Scotland will come back. My thing, and I think Rob Robertson wrote about this for the site, like, we've got to come back. The absolute priority is that we come back with no injuries. I think that if we pick up an injury, and especially a serious one, everybody will start saying, why did we play that extra game? Why did we go to South America?
How bonkers is it that that's what we're saying we need to do, though?
I mean,
like that's mad to be talking like that we just need to get everybody home. Like the thing against Chile, boys were being exposed to an international environment, working with the coaches getting to know them on tour.
Yeah.
We see the tip of the iceberg, and I think it's important that we remember that. But to be going to Uruguay and for people with a fair bit of rugby knowledge to be saying we just need to get everybody home safe feels a bit bonkers.
It just, I think after such a long, we were talking last week, and players were in a World Cup training camp last May. It's now the 22nd of July. And this week last year, they would have been preparing for a World Cup warm-up fixture. Like, some of these guys haven't had much of a break. And you look at somebody like Sione, you're now saying after he got injured in the Six Nations, is almost like the halfway point in his season. And that seems mad. But and if that's the way rugby's going in this sort of global calendar, then I do worry that players will end up having even shorter careers, but that's probably an issue for another day. Yeah, look,
We've got a lot of issues for another
yeah,
day.
we do. We do have a lot of stuff that we could get into, but we definitely need to make more time. We could do one of these every night.
Oh, that would go down a storm. It'd be great for me. It's like therapy for me, big man. So here's my bit, right? And I don't think this is of any value to anybody, but I love that a tier 1 team has gone to these 4 countries. There's a lot of people saying the All Blacks should have played Fiji and Fiji because that would have had a big impact. They take it to San Diego. I've no doubt financially that was a better thing to do. It spread their brand, yada, yada. The right thing to do was probably to go to Fiji and play Fiji there. Scotland have gone, and it's a bit of spreading the game. I think there's a positive for me. Selfishly, I would love to have gone to all 4 of those places to see what the rugby community is like in those places. And the stadium in Chile wasn't full, but I think what was 33,000 folk watching Scotland in. I think that
I think it was a record Chilean crowd for a rugby game, so it shows the appetite,
and to grow the game, which I'm still not sure whose job that is. If World Rugby have footed the bill for some of that because it's growing the game, brilliant. Nobody's going to tell me the finances, and honestly, I don't really want to know them anyway. But it feels like it's a lot of time, energy, and effort, and I'm not entirely sure where the benefit goes beyond that. Chile, I would imagine, got a huge amount out of it. I hope the community did. I hope Uruguay do. I hope it's not 70 points because that wouldn't feel right either. But also, it should be for Scotland. So this tour has completely messed with my mind.
Yeah, and I think to maybe throw it forward a wee bit, I don't know how you justify the award. We've talked about the awarding of caps, but the awarding of caps for a game on Saturday against Chile, when there's a story on our Scotland Rugby News website that Scotland A are going to play a game against Chile in November, which will obviously be uncapped. I don't know if that's determined by the strength of the Chilean players who are available. The team that we'll likely select, is that going to be weaker than the team that we put out at the weekend? I just don't understand how one can be capped and one isn't. And there's then a question about if that game's in November, where will it be played? Because I can't imagine Scotland A against Chile being at Murrayfield. Somewhere like Scotstoun might be a better fit. But yeah, I just think, yes, we've grown the game, but somebody made the point to me earlier, you don't win World Cups and Six Nations by being the charitable guys that go to Georgia, that go to Fiji and Samoa, that go to South America.
See, and this whole thing just smacks of a lack of identity for the game, which is definitely a whole other issue. But I still, and maybe I'm old-fashioned, I still hanker for big game on a Saturday, dirt trackers on a Tuesday. That to me, that would be spreading the game. Scotland A or Scotland Thistles playing against Ontario Select on the Tuesday in Canada, and then they play Canada on the Saturday, or they play the Canadian whatever,
or like
some kind of select team.
In a dream scenario, let's look at what Wales have done, and let's, Wales have had great highs. They might be in the doldrums now, but they're not. These things come in peaks and troughs. They went to Australia. They played 2 games against the Wallabies, and they've played a game against the Reds. Like, the idea that Scotland, as they did in 98 or 99, could go and play like the Waratahs, the Reds, the Brumbies, and then play the Wallabies with a full test team at the weekend. Like, you learn more from that, and even those midweek games, surely, or as much from that than you do from playing Chile and winning by 40 points.
Queensland Reds are away to play Tonga, I think, this
That's
weekend.
Right. Yeah.
I know.
So,
I mean, I don't know. I don't know who that is. I don't know who at Queensland Reds is putting together their fixtures. But fair play, because I think that's magic. You play Wales one week and then we're away to Tonga. I think there's a way to grow the brand and get folk excited. It comes to money, player welfare. I don't have any issue with, but squads are big enough now. When you think of the number of players that can go for a wee bit and then get sent home, you could have a completely different 23 playing on the Tuesday. And how good would it be if your test team were having to help a 23 prepare for a game on a Tuesday? There's the boot on the other foot. Right, now you go and hold a bag, son. Now you run the lineouts for that team on the Tuesday and pretend you're somebody else. I think that would be incredible.
And actually, we want to talk about preparing people, give people, Sione, Xander, Pierre Schumann, the time off to get ready for a Lions tour. Well, actually, on the Lions tour, you might be asked to go Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, and then play 3 tests. So actually, there's part of that would be great exposure, great experience. Now, look, I'm all. I wish the old school tours were still a thing. I think they probably aren't anymore. I think we'll see them die out even further. But I think it would be class to see Scotland on a. I have to get up here at 8 o'clock on a Wednesday morning to watch Scotland play the Crusaders.
Nice, love it. I don't know. I don't know how I do that. Maybe I'll get rid of Bill Beaumont and I'll take his job and we'll get a new broom in there. I'll be like P-Shot and I'll be wearing my suit and my white trainers just to show I'm still grounded.
It could have been you handing Liam McConnell that trophy at the Hive last week.
I know, instead of the boy that I used to watch on Question of Sport, I was laughing with my wife saying, do you know, it's funny how did he look at Bill Beaumont as that rugby legend? Do we look at him as the captain that used to go against Evelyn Hughes on Question of Sport? that just proves it all. Do you know, I thought the atmosphere, I was a wee bit disappointed. I didn't think the crowd looked that big, and then all of a sudden the Lothian stand filled up. I'm glad they put us in the stand that the sun was shining right into. That was magic. And
I was quite relieved I wasn't in the stand.
No wonder you'd have been struggling. And being Scottish, I took a coat rather than sunglasses. And then right at the end, I started a USA chant when they got that line out 5 meters for the line, and it sparked all my favourite chant, Scotland. Because I just wound everybody up, and then when he put that cross kick in and the boys scored, I was the only one on my feet giving it USA.
I did from the other stand hear the USA and turned to the journalists next to me and said, "If that's no Bruce, there's a doppelganger in the stands."
I just thought it was one of those. It was like supporting Langham at Melrose Sevens. Why were we not cheering America to get a score? Like, everybody should have been what? That's the rugby family. I also thought it was interesting that all the support team and family were in the main stand, and the folk that had paid £16.50 to watch, £60.50 admin charge on a ticket that there's another pod for another day.
We can talk about ticket prices all day long. I'm sure we'll get. There'll
be a few comments on that one.
Yeah,
listen, pal, it's been an interesting time. I think for Scottish rugby, it's probably been a good thing that there's been that much action on the pitch, because it's probably made folk focus on what we probably all want to focus on, which is players performing and us being able to support. I think the chance to go to the Hive to watch the 20s was class. I hope folk get behind the women's friendlies and get involved in that as well, because it's a brilliant thing to do. £16.50 and all.
I mean, your previous comments maybe haven't sold it as such, but no, I totally agree. It was actually good to see the Hive at least sort of a bit more full. Hopefully the crowds for the women's games are good. They've always had a sellout against England. I think that'll be hard to repeat anytime soon. But I'd like to think big crowds and some decent performances always help. I think we discussed before we came on air that we would do a pod next week to discuss our Fixing Scottish Rugby series, which I think will no doubt have a few comments, a few folk interested. So we'll get
with our special guest too. I'm excited.
Yeah,
I'm excited. So next week we'll fix Scottish Rugby. The week after, we'll have our women's hour, another special guest, and then who knows? By then, we'll just be back into the season, big chap.
That's exactly it. I mean, no rest for the wicked. So yeah, let's. There's always something going on. It's been good. Been a good few weeks, I think, with as you say, with the 20s, with the senior team, and yeah, I got the fright of my life when I saw Edinburgh were back in training. You think it feels like a long time since they last played, and not a long time since I last had a break. So yeah, we'll see. Hopefully, we can remedy one of those in the next couple of weeks.
Class. Loved it, big man. You need to go and speak to folk more important than me, but good to see you. We'll get folk to sign up. I think, hey, there's a few people are talking about it. I've had to respond to a few people saying it's £1, just pay it and stop moaning. So £1 for 6 months, £12 for 12 months. Sign up to Scotland Rugby News. You can read all about it, and I've got some more. Big man, I've got some more for you. I've got hundreds of ideas, loads of ideas for you. So I'm looking forward to it.
I always want ideas, so yeah, by all means, fire them my way. Good. And yeah, I'm sure we'll get folk talking.
Nice one. Great to see you, big man. All the best.
You too, and I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, will do. Cheers, bud.